At Impact, reflection is a core part of our approach to learning and our approach to leadership. But what do we actually mean by reflection? Why is it so important? And how can leaders develop their ability to reflect critically? To help me answer these questions, I'm joined by Impact's Sarah Morris. So welcome, Sarah. Thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Yeah, doing great. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Well, I'm happy that you're here also, and I'm excited to get into this topic with you today. But before we do, I'm going to ask you the same question that we ask all of our guests, which is to give our audience the chance to get to know you a little bit better. So why don't you just tell us about yourself in 60 seconds?
Sure. I live in Connecticut with my husband and two teenage daughters, which is a learning experience in itself. I've spent about 25 years in the field of leadership and talent development, and actually realized I think I've been connected in some way to Impact for almost 20 years. So,
Mm,
first half of my career was on the corporate side at UBS Financial Services, where I actually was a client of Impact's for a
mm.
while. And then the past 10 years or so, I've been on the consulting side working with Impact. So, it's been great and feel lucky to enjoy what I do and work with great people. And on the personal side, I love staying active, whether it's exercise, sports, have kind of my labor of love, gardening,
Mm.
time with friends. I'm pretty active volunteering in the community. Yeah, so that's a little about me.
Amazing. Well, I'm excited to sort of tap into your wealth of knowledge and experience from your career, and maybe who knows, we'll get a little bit of gardening in there too. But before we do, let's dive into kind of the main question that we're asking, which is what is reflection? What do we mean by reflection?
Sure. And ironically, I spent some time reflecting on that when you shared the topic for our discussion. And I think I'll pull a bit from one of the official definitions. So reflection really means applying serious thought or consideration to something. And
Mm,
it can be to yourself. So stopping and thinking about your thoughts, behavior, motivations behind something. You can look at a situation. So just reflecting on a meeting, a decision, an action, maybe others' reactions. Um, and of course, you can reflect on bigger topics like life, relationships, your career overall.
mm.
So it can encompass a lot of things.
Yeah, and I'm kind of keen to delve a little bit deeper into what what does what does reflection look like in reality? Like because I
Yeah.
think it can be one of those things that can be tricky for people to grasp. So maybe let's kind of look at it with the lens of what role does it have maybe if we look at it from the leadership perspective, what role does it have in the leadership toolkit?
Yeah. So, I mean, reflection is it's really the foundation for many other skills, and it's really all
Hmm.
about learning. And I think when you stop and you spend some time on self-reflection or personal reflection, it helps us make sense of things around us and kind of allows us to understand what's important, you know, what do we need to focus on, what we might need to do differently. Many times it involves asking questions,
Hmm.
of yourself. And kind of in a day to day, it can kind of be almost like a debrief on something. And I think it really is important because I think as a leader, in terms of thinking about reflection in your leadership toolkit, um, it really helps with self-awareness. So
Yeah.
you have to have a little courage, take a little honest look, you know, let me think about how I just handled that situation. What did I do well? Maybe what might I do differently? Maybe what's my kind of new mindset coming out of this? Um, I think it also helps from things like decision making, uh, just spending a little time assessing a situation or analyzing kind of decisions or how it's been handled in the past, maybe helps you kind of adapt to a new situation, take a new perspective, a new mindset. Um, and then, as I mentioned at the beginning, from a learning standpoint, and I think this applies to day to day, but I also think about how we use reflection in some of our program experiences.
Hmm.
taking some time to reflect, it helps you capture learning takeaways, and then I think it helps you personalize it. So,
Mm,
okay, what does that mean? Um, what does it mean for me? How is it going to impact me? And I think a lot of times the end of reflection, as you kind of come to a conclusion of it, is okay. So what? Or
mm,
now
mm.
what? So, and it kind of then again, it might just be a new perspective. It might just be thinking about approaching something a little differently. It might be a clear decision or an action, but um, I think it's an incredibly valuable tool in a leader's toolkit.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there. And I'm curious to pick out a couple of things that you said there, because one of the things you mentioned was about the approach to experiential learning, which Impact is sort of specializes in. All of our solutions that we provide for our clients is around experiential learning, and reflection being a key part of that. And we put participants into those situations where they're given that time to reflect on the learning that they've had during their experience with us. What does, in terms of in day-to-day life, what does reflection look like? Like how? So
Great
maybe
question.
you could share. Do you make time to reflect, or is it something that just comes naturally to you? How does it work for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say it seems so simple in some ways, but reflection actually can be hard. I feel like the pace of life and work, many times you can get caught just going from one thing to another, putting out a fire, crisis, just dealing with something, and
Mm,
can find yourself in autopilot, I think, a little. So I do think you have to be intentional. Maybe it's because of the line of work I'm in. I think I naturally do kind of pause and think about how that went. And I think in terms of what that looks like, I mean, even just yesterday on a call with a group of us and a client, we kind of huddled after for
mm,
10 minutes and spent a little time just saying, yeah, how did that work? Were we okay on roles? Um, what do we hear? And it was interesting to hear everybody reflect a bit about what they took away, what was important. And I think it helped us actually get a little more aligned
mm.
in terms of next steps and what we heard. And I think, I do that here and there sometimes on with just myself on if something, even if something really went well, or maybe something had there was something that was really frustrating, taking a moment to be like, gosh, why was that?
Mm.
What was it? And it's good because then sometimes you do come up with, yeah, maybe I should have started it this way, or that conversation or that
Yeah.
relationship. So um yeah.
And it's key to development, isn't it? The kind of being able to reflect on either the way something's went, or maybe something you've been told, and it can help you learn to change if necessary uh,
Yes.
what the way you approach something another time, or approach a meeting, approach a whatever it is that you, or a challenge. So let's uh, and I was also thinking about the time aspect there, and for some people, when I've seen these processes go on impact programs, for example, there's, as I say, that dedicated time that people are given. And I kind of then thought that for some people that might be the commute home from the office that day, um, or it might be that they actually have to physically go and book an hour in their calendar, or whatever it might be.
Right.
So in terms of developing those skills, if you like, for their ability to reflect, what advice can you give for leaders to how to develop that ability to reflect?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I think a few things come to mind. I think, well, first of all, I think you have to kind of acknowledge the value of it, right? And I do
Mm,
think everything you see, you read about, re- re- being more reflective, I think is going to help you be more effective. And so I think acknowledging that it's important, being intentional about it, and kind of two main things come to mind, and a few other things. So one is the power of a pause. And we actually speak to that a lot in some of our programs. And there is such power in a pause. And that could mean big or little things. So sometimes in the middle of an experiential activity, we literally call a timeout.
Yeah.
It just might be a few minutes, but in your day, you know, maybe you get some email and you're frustrated and you just say, nope, I'm just going to take a second and pause. Or you're struggling with a problem or having trouble, dealing with some different situations, just pausing for a second and stepping back and just taking a moment, think about what you're doing, why you're doing it, how it's being received. I think it really helps you take the time to reflect. And then the outcome is usually positive in terms of maybe there's a decision or you realign, you refocus, refresh. And the second thing, in terms of specifics, is asking questions, asking good questions. So I would argue that great questions are some of the foundations of a great leader's toolkit. So questions are powerful when you're trying to coach someone, when you're trying to sell something to someone, when you're trying to handle a difficult conversation across the board. And I think it's no different with reflection.
Mm.
So, taking a second and say, how's that going? What worked well? What's not working? What am I noticing about my leadership in all those situations? I've been doing this, or um, is this helping me progress towards on my goals? What was surprising in that meeting to me? And then I think, as I mentioned before, getting into the okay, so what, and now what? And so I think power of a pause and stopping to ask some questions of yourself, of the situation, is huge.
Mm.
And just a last comment, I think you mentioned it, and I think it's exactly right. It's a skill. You have to practice it.
Mm.
And so some of it is just, making time for it. Do you put 10 minutes in your calendar a day? Is it 15 minutes at the end of every week? It can
Yeah.
be big and small. Do you take a walk around the office or your house? Do you write things down? Because those, just to make it a habit.
Yeah.
After a meeting, do you huddle with your team? So
Yeah,
those
I
kind of
mean, I don't know if you've noticed, I was furiously writing down notes then, and there's some really, really nice things that I wanted to kind of
yeah,
play back, I guess,
yeah.
because they just hit me so hard. Like the being more reflective allows you to be more effective. I thought it was such a great way of framing it, that because it does, and then the power of pause, that the power of those two things combined, I think, can really resonate.
Mhm.
Then and then yeah, being active around that reflection and making the time rather than just having the time, I think's super important. And then again, another one I wrote down, which you kind of briefly touched on there, is creating that environment for that allows you to reflect in the best way. So yeah,
Love
one of the
that.
things that I was thinking of as you were talking was that I would prefer to go for a walk. I mean, I'm very fortunate in that our office is on the it's surrounded by amazing countryside. So to go for a nice reflective walk seems easier than it maybe would be in the middle of a city. I don't know,
Yeah.
but creating that environment where you can get the best from that reflection period, I think is quite an important point. Would you agree?
Completely agree. And I think I'm kind of building on you, stepping away from that. Sometimes that's what you've been, so you might be stumped with something for
Mm,
all week and just can't sort it out. And just stepping away, going into a different environment, not thinking about it for a minute, then maybe coming back to it with a different lens. Sometimes all of a sudden you realize, oh, it, this is what I need to be doing. Or, yeah, it really, I think I like that idea too of creating an environment for it with your teams and people around
yeah.
you too.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I was thinking about it there from an individual perspective, but it totally applies to a team as well. It might be that, you need, if you're a leader of a team, you should get the whole team to go and do an active part of reflection. So, yeah, super powerful stuff there. That's kind of reached me to the end of my questions. Before we go, I just wanted to ask you if there's anything we've not asked you that you maybe wanted to bring up in this topic.
I'm trying to think. I think it's just sometimes it's the simple small things
Mm.
that move the dial more. And so I think again, and reflection may seem so passive. It seems like a passive thing, reflecting, but it's so active and it's so I think there's only positive outcomes to reflecting. And maybe this is one other thing I would say is when you're reflecting on yourself, you know, try to go at it without a little don't be too critical or too I don't know what the word is, biased or it's not about like regret. It's about looking back to look to move forward better, right?
Mm.
So taking that moment to just say, okay, yeah, like the meeting didn't go exactly how I wanted, or uh, so what would I do next? What would I do differently? And also capturing positive. So um yeah, I think that's what the only other
Yeah.
piece I would add.
Well, Sarah, that's been brilliant. And thank you again for taking the time to come and ask and answer some of those questions with me. Before we let you go, I'm going to ask you one final question, which is, I suppose, slightly more of a personal question. But it's the sort of question that we ask all of our guests on our podcast, which is to, again, I suppose, a bit of reflection in itself,
Yeah.
which is to, if you think back, if you were to start your career again, what would be the advice that you would give your younger self?
Yeah. No, this was when you mentioned that you might touch on this. I have been reflecting on it quite a bit. It's been good for me, actually. Many things came to mind.
Right.
Um, so I might leave you with kind of two ones. Uh, one that came to mind is I think just sometimes in youth, we assume we know so much. We kind of are just going through the motions, and I would
Mm.
tell myself to kind of slow down and be curious. Take the time to better, to ask a question and really approach things with a level of curiosity. I think that would serve me well. And the other one that came to mind, actually, a wonderful boss of mine back at UBS had shared this with us, and I think it's a great approach to the world around this, and I think even more so today with technology, and that's assume positive intent. So you get an email from someone, you get a message. It's so easy to misread it or make an assumption about their motivations, why they're doing something. And it's always great to start with assuming positive intent. It just can change the dynamic about how you respond to it initially. You may
Mm.
be ultimately proven wrong. It doesn't mean you continue if then it's maybe not coming from a good place, but I think it creates such better, productive, constructive conversations and relationships when you start from that point of kind of giving someone the benefit of the doubt in terms of their intentions and where they're coming from. So,
Mm. And it's so relevant to what you've just been talking about for the past 15, 20 minutes about because it goes hand in hand so well with reflection, doesn't it? Because you can have an instant moment of reflection whenever you get that email. You can
yes.
go, right, I'm gonna read that again and just
Yep.
make sure that I've read it right. And yeah, so and of course it's something that we can all relate to. I think we're all so yeah. I think that's some great self advice, but also
Yeah.
advice to others as well. Sarah, that's it. Thank you very much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time, and yeah, thank you again for sharing your insights on the topic of reflection.
Yeah. Thank you. I've enjoyed the conversation. It's always good to
Great.
step back and think about what we're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much again. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of In Good Company. If you would like to find out any more about Impact or the work we do, or perhaps you'd like to explore our leadership playbook, then you'll find all of the links that you need in the description of where you found today's episode. So thank you very much for tuning in, and until the next time, take care.